Uh, so before I get started, we all know Windows Active Directory, right? Everybody thinks it's very insecure. In a lot of ways it is, right? And when we talk about trying to secure it, you get this monolithic amount of stuff that people tell you. You need to have credential management. You need to use two-factor auth. You need to have backup plans. You need to have, oh geez, everything under the sun. And then maybe you'll be secure, right? Well, I've been doing, red team and pen testing for the last year, and I've noticed a couple of common misconfigurations out there, some default settings that I see over and over again, right? And so I've picked up my top 3 that I want to cover that actually are very easy to correct and will give you a big step forward when people come in, whether they're attacking you because you've asked them to or they're attacking you because they want to. All right, so 3 things out of that monolithic list. Before I start, my name is Eric Kuehn. I work for a company, Secure Ideas. I've been there, started in January. But before that, I've actually had 20 years of IT experience, which is very hard for me to say, to think that I've been doing this for 20 years, but I have. And 17 of those actually have been revolving around Active Directory. All right, I was lucky enough to get on a project, when AD started in Windows 2000. I got started there, and I never really looked back because I enjoyed it, all right? Before I started with Secure Ideas, I worked for a small financial company based out of Charlotte called Bank of America. You might know that one. I say that I was responsible for some people say one of, but I say the largest and most complex AD environments that's out there in the world, right? I'm talking 250 domain controllers across the world. And I'm not talking like a little server. I'm talking about a 16-core, 32 gig of RAM server hosting massive amounts of data. We did 1 billion transactions a day through our domain controllers, all right? Huge amounts of data. Some big numbers just to wow you, right? We're talking about 400,000 users, 2.1 million groups, 44,000 OUs, 52,000 GPOs, right? Lots and lots of stuff. We had servers, Windows, Linux, Unix, mainframes, everything was riding off of my directory, all right? Kind of important, kind of big. So, did that for 11 years. Before that, I got to do Active Directory for Walt Disney World out of Orlando. Also pretty fun, not nearly as big, but lots of fun. When I'm not working, I do have some hobbies. I'm a movie enthusiast. I actually, my major was not IT. It was film and audio with an acting minor, right? But I fell into computers because of my wife. When I'm not doing that, watching movies, which I love to do, I like to play games, board games, video games, etc. Unfortunately, I have 4 kids, right? And they've all gotten to the point where they'd like to do things. So really, my hobby is taking them to their hobbies. The ubiquitous slide, right? My company was very nice enough to pay for me to be here, so I have to put it up there. We're a security consulting firm. We do lots of things. I think we're pretty good at it. Some quick notes. I said, we're going to talk about how to secure Active Directory, 3 things, right? Everything I'm going to talk about is basic Windows stuff. I'm not trying to sell you a product. I'm not trying to sell you anything, all right? All of these do kind of rely on Active Directory or Windows 2012 R2. Not all of them, but most of them. That seems kind of hard to swallow by some people. 2012 R2 has been out for 4 years now. If you're not there for your domain controllers, I would really urge you to try and upgrade them. You only need to upgrade your domain controllers, not every server, right? And some of the principles we talked about actually work for everything in Windows. But hey, we'll start with AD. Attacking AD itself is really hard, okay? Domain controllers are secure by nature, unless someone has decided to install something else like, a web server or SQL or something else on there, or you've downgraded security settings that Microsoft has put in by default. It's really secure. It's hard to deal with, right? So attackers, they come in, and they know they can't get to your domain controller by default, so they start with a weaker system, like a workstation, right? They get some credentials, they kind of move around, they look, they try and figure out where your domain admin credentials are, find that, steal them, and then they get everything, right? They own you because they can do anything they want. You may or may not have heard of the golden ticket. It's a wonderful thing out there that an attacker can get that says, I have unfettered access to your directory for 10 years, and you will never see me, right? That's pretty much what it is. There are some detections, but not. It does rely on getting domain admin. So what does that mean? When we're talking about the first step here, the biggest thing is protecting your domain admin credentials. So we all know the weakest part of our network is the workstation or your laptop, right? It's the weakest thing. People can get phished. You can somehow lose access to it. And let's say you're a very security conscious company and you've loaded everything you could ever find on those laptops. You have, CrowdStrike and Bit9 and antivirus and who knows what else. And that thing is locked down. People can barely open Word because it takes 40 minutes for it to load. That's how much stuff you have on there. Believe it or not, by default, I can bypass that immediately. Now, I forgot to say, I have live demos because I'm a glutton for punishment, so we're going to see how this works. But I'm going to try and show you how easy it is to bypass this. So all I have here, I set up a little Windows 2012 R2 domain. I have my Windows box, Windows 10, pretty basic. I think everybody's familiar with how you bypass this. I'm just going to come in here. I'm going to say, hey, you know what? Let me join the domain. I did manage to get a user account somehow, right? So I'm an attacker. I came in. I got your workstation, but I found that I couldn't run anything. But I have this info. So here I am. I'm user 1. And I'll show to you. Oops. So I say, hey, lab, and I'm user 1, and I'll show you this ID in just a second to show you that I have no rights to anything. Oh, hey, look at that. I just joined your domain. I now have my own Windows 10 box out there that has no antivirus, none of your controls, nothing stopping me from doing whatever I want. But before I restart, I want to make this even better, all right? I want to make sure that, hey, this box is going to stay mine. So I come in here, oops, and I go to users and groups. Once again, I've done nothing except use Windows. I'm going to take this guy out because I don't want domain admins to have rights. I'm going to put myself back in here, so I do. Oh, prompts me, no big deal. There we go. Now I'll let it reboot. Once again, I now have a box that I'm an admin. Well, how the heck did that just happen? Let me start my slide again. Like I said, so hey, I joined it, no problem, that was easy. I'm not going to remove the SPNs, and I'll cover why those are important in a little bit. But like I said, I have a Windows box, it's mine to do whatever I want. How did this happen? Because by default, Microsoft included this setting that says, hey, add workstations to the domain. Can you see that? It's in the GPO, it's in the default domain controller's GPO. It's there. It might sound like this is what you need to be part of to join workstations or computers to the domain, but you don't, all right? This is an extra setting. And by default, you might see right here it says authenticated users. That means anybody in the forest, not just your domain, can do this. All right, so maybe you haven't gone through and done delegation to say users can, my IT department can go in and create computer objects in the OU or something like that. Change this. Go to your default domain controller policy. Change it from authenticated users to the group who should be doing this work. Please, don't leave it open. Now, the other thing that I have on here, another way of quick win, is change where that computer gets moved to when you join it, right? By default, they get joined to the computer's container. What does that mean? It means it sits there right underneath the root of your domain, and there's no policies assigned to it except the high-level stuff, which is typically like your password policy. Nothing else is being pushed to it probably. No controls. With this redir command, you can move it to some special OU in your directory, all right? Something like one of our clients did to us because I did this trick to them. They're a very security conscious company, but they still had this for some reason. We showed them, hey, look what I can do. And then suddenly they changed it to, they pointed me to this nice little OU where the computer, it had a script in the GPO, so the computer booted up, and it said, oh, just shut down. So all my computer did at that point is it just shut down as soon as it started, right? You don't need to go to that level, but you could put it to an OU where you get to do things like, push all of your antivirus and CrowdStrike and Bit9 immediately, right? It is unusable to me at that point. So quick win, easy to do. Like I said, check this out. It's amazing. I didn't think this would be popular. But since I started in January, I'd say about 80% of the clients that I've gone to and the other people at Secure Ideas have gone to have had this opening because it's easily missed and forgotten. So that's one. Next up, this is another one that's really, really big. And it's not actually an attack against a domain controller, right? Because I said that's really hard to do. This is actually going to hit your member servers, right? There's something called an SMB Relay. Is everybody familiar with the pass the hash technique that attackers like to do, right? Where you get some credentials, you store them, and then you log in with those offline. You don't have the actual ID, but you have the hash. The SMB Relay is even cooler than that, okay? Because typically, pass the hash doesn't work with NTLM v2, right? It gets downgraded. It only works with NTLM v1, an older protocol that Microsoft says is really, really bad. SMB relays work with any version of NTLM. So here we go, danger time, demo number 2. What does this look like? Bring it up. It's important. I'm using something from Responder to set this up, okay? But there are lots of different tools that do this, right? This is just one I use because it lets me do some other things later. But all it is once again, you get your attacker that comes in, and he says, hey, I've seen that it looks like things are not working right, and I can get credentials, but I'm going to set this up. And all I've done is I've picked a target, and I've said, I want you to run a command if somebody comes through this network, right, and touches me, tries to log into this device. And it's just waiting here. And then suddenly, I'm going to use a domain admin because, hey, everything runs as domain admin, right? It happened so fast because I only have one screen, you didn't see it. All I did is I just browsed to this computer, my attacking device. I said, hey, look at that. I found this ID. It tried to connect to me. I'm going to try and connect to that target you picked. It's an administrator. That's great. Hey, you have shell. Oh, I forgot a command. It's going to bomb out. Anyways, so how did this one work? Well, like I said, it relies on NTLM authentication. I said, remember in the beginning, I'm going to put my Windows host out there and I'm going to remove some SPNs. SPNs are an application's identification in the directory for Kerberos authentication. Kerberos is really hard to break through because it's ticket-based, right? It's like a certificate. The directory says, hey, you can access this. Here's your cert. Give it to the device. Kind of hard to break through that. NTLM, v1, v2, or Landman if you're still using it, is much easier. It's challenge response, right? So you're this host over here, and you said, I want to access the file server. So your host sends it on and says, hey, can I access that document? The server responds back and says, well, let me make sure you're actually who you say you are. So encrypt this little bit of data. Your workstation does it, sends it over, and the server says, yep, I agree, you're you. Come on in, have a nice time. Pass the hash works with, I find those hashes, I store them, and then I log in later. Well, an SMB relay works a little bit different. Like I said, I have an attacking device, and I put it on your network, compromised host, maybe the one I just joined to your domain a little while ago, right? What happens is something comes by and attaches to it. Big picks would be, like your config management system or your vulnerability scanning system that has admin to everything, right? It just sits there waiting for these credentials to come by and touch it. So it sits there. That will say, let's use Nessus. Nessus comes over and finds this device and says, hey, let's scan you. Can I have access? The device says, hold on, let me forward this request on to my target server that my attacker picked. The server says, hey, do you have access? Encrypt this for me. Sends it to the host, the attacking device. The attacking device sends it right back to the Nessus server. Says, hey, encrypt this for me. The Nessus server does it nicely for you. And once again, we forward that on. And suddenly, we have admin access. And the Nessus server just gets an invalid access or something. You have access over here. You have whatever you want to do. Downside is, it's only one host at a time. But that's not really a big deal, right? And actually, this works well for pen testers too, but it's better for a real attacker because pen testers, we have a week, right? We have to be kind of noisy trying to get access. Attackers can sit there forever just waiting for that scan to come through. The other thing is, I said it waits for something to touch to it. You don't have to actually wait for someone to browse, right? There's all these wonderful tools like Responder and Inve, all the landman poisoners that you can run that just start grabbing credentials as they go across the wire. They link in right to a multi-relay or any one of these tools. Grab it, try them. Every time they see one of these hashes, it tries the access. And if it picks one, once again, you win, right? So it doesn't take an automated process. It can just be sitting on your network waiting. How do you protect yourself from this one? There are two ways to do it. This is the oldest method, and you could do automatically, right, called SMB Signing, right? SMB Signing basically says that your server that you're accessing when you're trying to access a file share is going to check every single packet of data and validate it's actually coming from who it's supposed to come from. As you would guess, this kind of causes some overhead. Microsoft says 15%, and that, I think, is being very generous. Okay? I've seen file copies get exponentially longer if you turn this on. All right? Doesn't sound good, but it is an option. It's two parts, like everything with Microsoft, a client and a server part. The good news is the client part, it's already enabled by default. Everything in your domain since 2008 by default says, I will do SMB signing. The server side is only enabled on DCs. You have to choose to enable it otherwise. Now, very important. If you've gone into your default domain controller policy and you have turned off SMB signing on your domain controllers, please turn it back on, right? Because once again, this is probably the only thing stopping an SMB relay from hitting your domain controller right off the bat. Your domain controller shouldn't be doing huge file copies, so it shouldn't impact it very much, right? So turn it back on. How do you do it? Via GPO or local security policy with that digitally signed communications always, right? Or you can do it via the registry if you want. This is the way I'd recommend, but there's a problem with it. It's only available if you're running Active Directory 2012 R2 domain functional level, right? It's a bummer. But if, like I said, it's been out for 4 years. If you haven't done it, please try and upgrade your domain controllers to it. It's a protected users group. It's a great thing that Microsoft put in, right? It has a whole bunch of features that we're not really focused on up at the top that work automatically even if you're not 2012 R2 functional. But the big one down here is that no NTLM authentication, right? If you are running 2012 R2 DFL, these accounts, the accounts that are in this group, can only use Kerberos. And on top of that, they actually can't even get delegated Kerberos. That means if you have something called the Kerberos double hop in your environment, which is instead of having your website use a service account to connect to a database, you connect to the website, it forwards your ticket on to the database, it's a double hop. That won't work. This group is not meant for normal users. It's meant for admin accounts. And that's it, okay? Microsoft says don't put service accounts in here for a variety of other things. It wouldn't break them, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. It is meant for your domain admins, your server admins, workstation admins, whatever it is. If you are running 2012 R2 domain level, put in a domain admin, give it a try. It should work. It shouldn't break anything because your domain admin account should just be doing that, RDP access to a domain controller or admin functions. They shouldn't need it. Very important thing that I don't have on here, don't put any accounts in this group that haven't changed their password since you upgraded your domain to 2008 domain functional level. Microsoft, in the background at that point, actually it was 2008 R2, switched encryption methods on the password in AD. Before that point in time, it used something a little less secure. When you're in this group, it can't accept that encryption level. So if you put your ID in there and you haven't changed your password since, 2008, you will get locked out immediately. It'll just lock you out, all right? So this is absolutely wonderful, and if you want, I could demo it showing you not working, but it will give you an access denied because once again, you can't use NTLM authentication. It breaks that whole challenge response. So last bit of thing. This is probably the most difficult one to talk about, right? Avoid the masses. I have segmenting accounts. When security folks come in, they talk about segmenting your network, right? Keep your PCI data away from your normal corporate network or your HIPAA or whatever it is. What they don't always talk about is account separation. And that's what this is about. This is probably the most common thing we see out there, right? We have our normal accounts, and then everybody has an admin account. And that admin account is used on everything, right? Workstations or servers or domain, etc. Heck, there's some places who still just have one account, right? We all know that's kind of bad, but still, two. And then they do things like, oh, I'm on my workstation, I log in, and then I do a run as from my workstation, right? To my domain or my admin account and move on. That is not enough separation, and I'll kind of go into why a little bit later. You really need to start thinking in tiers. This is a Microsoft term, tiering. Here's just a rough sample, right? You have your workstations, we know are insecure, your normal user accounts, and then you have accounts that administer or admins on workstations. And then you have server or accounts that are administrators on app servers, and then one's on infrastructure servers, and then one that are your domain admin accounts. It's important to separate, to think about our devices this way, and separate our accounts into this manner so we can block the wonderful ability for attackers to pivot and escalate, right? You look at those tiers and you say, well, I need to have multiple accounts, and they need to have different passwords. Please don't use the same password, right? But when we're talking about somebody who is a domain admin, it moves into lots of accounts. I know it, right? You have your, as I said, your server admin account, because you probably do that, your general user account, one that does AD admin functions, such as creating new OUs or subnets. And then you have your domain admin account that's used for doing really, really special stuff like promoting a domain controller, demoting a domain controller, something that requires that level. And it's only used at that time, right? We need to stop running around with domain admin credentials all the time. And I have removed common service accounts. This is the toughest one, okay? Because Microsoft and everybody says, just throw it in domain admins, right? Throw all those accounts in so it has rights. Well, I showed you before, right? When I built my workstation, I removed domain admins out of that group. You don't need to use domain admins. You can use anything you want as a server administrator because it's held at the server level. But that also goes to service accounts, all right? Just because you have locked down your domain account for your users and it has two-factor auth and it has all this stuff, right? If you're using service accounts that run with domain admin privileges, they're sitting on your devices in memory, waiting for someone to get them, right? And then you go through your tiering, you have your multiple accounts, and this is the biggest one. Never, ever, ever use an account with more permissions on a lower, less secure device. That's interesting. So why do I say we need this? This whole idea of the account separation is important because, as I said, we can't attack AD directly, right? We need to do something. And there are these great tools that sit out there to help us. The first one I show over there is something called Bloodhound. It's a great little tool where basically you get on a network, you get regular user credentials, and you start scanning the environment to see where those domain admins sit. And then it gives you a beautiful little chart that says, for you to go to domain admin, go to this workstation where you can escalate yourself to administrator to get those credentials. Now move to this server where you can now escalate, then move to domain admin. It gives you a nice little follow the path, yellow brick road, all right? If you separate your accounts into different tiers, there's essentially a wall. It's impassable, right? If your domain admin accounts only are used on domain controllers, there is no way for me to get them, okay? Same thing with server admin. We see it constantly over and over again where it just takes moving to one server and then you get to move on, which is why you separate them, because you have things like, Mimikatz that can dump credentials from memory. I do suggest, once again, only logging into the devices that you should with these accounts. I have something called a secure admin host. Microsoft calls it a PAW, Privileged Access Workstation. I don't like it because that gives the intention that you have a device sitting next to your laptop on your desk that you do admin work with, right? I like to have my secure device be with my servers because of those landman poisoners, right? Once again, workstation's insecure. That means your workstation network is insecure because it's always passing your credentials across the network, and I can grab them. I may not be able to use them, but if you use an insecure password like summer 2017, or we're in winter now, right? Winter 2017, I'll probably crack it in 8 hours, all right? So you separate them out, you put your secure admin host next to your servers, and you only log in with the IDs that should be there. So the reason, once again, is all because of Mimikatz, right? I sat there, and I said, and what I did before, right, with the SMB Relay, is I actually made a connection to this device right here, right, this server. And just because I felt goofy, I logged in and I did a run as, the common technique, right? You log into your workstation, you do a run as to an elevated account. That means it logged in, right? It's sitting on that device right now. So because I used Responder, it's wonderful, and it will let me run Mimikatz, just like that. And if we kind of go back up through here, which is kind of hard to scroll with, we'll eventually find, hey, well, here's the server admin account in memory, because he's logged in right now doing work, and here's his password. It's very secure, password 1. But if I didn't want to use that, I can also just grab his credentials, right, his hash. I'll come back to DA2 in a minute. Scrolling is not working as well as I would like. Here's SA1 again, because there he is. So here's my domain admin account that I found, also using an incredibly secure password, right? DA1. I should show the accounts in a minute to prove. But here's the important one, and why I kept bringing up protected users, and it does other things. We go even further. I have domain admin 2 also did a run as on this box. Inappropriately, he shouldn't. But you'll notice some things. We don't see his password. We don't see his NTLM hash, and that's because he's a member of the protected users group, right? If we go in and we can look, protected users just sits in the users group, it appears, and we have domain admin 2 sitting in that box, sitting in this group. So we get some extra protections. Now, it's not perfect because, hey, it has some information harder to crack, but it's still there, right? Protected users gives you a big jump. Separating it out so that we didn't even have the ability to get these credentials from the server is even better. Now, when I talked about you need to secure, and I showed all those wonderful different levels, right? Hey, you need to have separate accounts for each one of these. All right, that might be a little tough. I get it. That takes a little bit more work. But going in right now and creating a new domain admin account, don't use one that already exists, creating a new domain admin account for your domain admins and only using it on domain controllers and removing that rights from your other accounts is a big step forward, right? It's all about that separation. So yes, doing the tiering, doing the entire segmentation hard. New account for domain admins, very easy. So, in review, I kept this short because I know everybody wants to go to lunch, right? 3 things you can do really fast. Remove authenticated users, right, from the add workstations to domain. That one's really easy. If you don't have it, do it. Please change it. If you want to keep it because you haven't done the delegation with rights, and I can go into that later if you'd like, just change it to the group that actually needs that ability, okay? Don't leave it that way. Protect yourself from SMB relay attacks. These are great because it works on almost every Windows environment, right? SMB signing, really hard to deal with. Maybe that one could be tough, right? Use protected users if you can. please. That is a great group. It's a great security enhancement. I don't have segment your IDs, but that's the other part, right? And then yes, have a separate domain admin account that only logs into domain controllers or a specific admin host to do those functions. This includes service accounts, and never ever do run as. And the service accounts, people ask me all the time, does this mean I need a separate patching environment for my domain controllers? My answer is maybe. I don't know what your setup is, right? But if you run a type of system like Nessus or something else or whatever it might be, typically you can specify different credentials in that application to connect to your different devices, right? So if it is very secure, you treat it as a domain controller where only highest level permissions can log into that device itself or that application, and it connects into lower secure devices with a different ID, you are better off than you are right now running with that service account as a domain admin. So that's it, 31 minutes. Like I said, I want to get people out to lunch, so I kind of ran through it fast. But does anybody have any questions about this or anything else with AD, really? Because I'll try and answer it. Yes, sir.
How about restricting login to workstations from those other accounts? So basically your domain ad.
Oh, absolutely. So I don't cover it because that one could be a little bit more impactful. But yes, I mean, really the best practice is you should have everything in OUs, right? And you can deny logins and deny the ability to do interactive or service or any other for any group. I would definitely push that in via GPO, right? Wherever your workstations sit, I would push that down that they cannot log in. Yes. Any other questions? Yes.
Yeah, based on the last technique with Mimikatz, have you used that as like a social engineering? Have you compromised a host and social engineered an admin to log into it, and then lie and wait for that to happen?
We have.
Okay,
I mean,
yeah.
but typically we don't need to, right? That's
Done it for her.
yeah. I mean, because once again, even if they don't do run as on their workstations, they're on a server, right? And jumping from a workstation to a server is not very hard, right? It doesn't take a lot to move that one level. But in a lot of places, we still see the run as because the thought is I'm using two-factor auth. I'm set. I'm good, right? Because I can't use my credentials because I'm using two-factor auth.
It's not a magic bullet.
It's not, right? Heck, depending on your setup, your hash, right, your actual hash, password hash, your NTLM hash, all that good stuff is only set at the first time you change your password and you put it on the smart card, right? It's changed when you change your password. So that means some things like Mimikatz that are really good at this stuff, I can still take that hash that you thought was encrypted and using two-factor auth and just move right on with it, and you won't know. I don't need the token. I don't need the smart card to move on, all right? It depends on your implementation. What else? Yes?
Maybe just like a tip, I think, for blue teams is when you work in a security incident, you might want to have security incident admin credentials, because so you don't, someone doesn't perform that attack, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, yes. I mean, yeah. The best thing is to have credentials that you make admin on that device at that moment, right? And there are also some pretty good tools out there that can just be lying in wait for you to do things anonymously in the background. Yes, sir.
What do you suggest as sort of a bastion host strategy moving between your security boundaries?
That's like a loaded question.
It's totally loaded. I'm just curious, like ideas. Like,
No.
I mean, like,
All right, so it depends at what level you're at. Okay, everybody knows about ArcSight, right? The big credential management systems, okay, that sit out there, which are pretty good. The problem with all those systems is that you still need something to base your authentication off of, and people tend to pick AD, right? So I use my AD account to log into this offline source to get my admin account. So I just need to compromise my AD account to get access. Or, oh my goodness, somebody was malicious. They came and they trashed my AD environment. I can't get to my passwords anymore, right? Not necessarily a good thing. They're good, don't get me wrong, but it's all about your implementation. Microsoft recently released something based on Server 2016 that is actually a pretty good solution if you have time to invest in it. It is based upon their MIIS, or their credential management system. It works really well. And its entire existence is at Bastion Forest, where you put your admin credentials. It does mystical stuff in the background to give you permissions for a very short period of time in your primary forest, and then it revokes them immediately. Everybody probably knows Windows typically. When you log in at that moment, your token is sealed, right? So if you're an admin when you log in, even if in the background somebody removes you from those groups, you still are an admin. That's great. Not with this solution. It does things with shadow groups and all this other wonderful stuff that when your time expires, your permissions are gone. It's definitely worth looking at.
What was that again?
So Microsoft calls it the Bastion Forest, or PAM, Privileged Access Management. They change the name like every month and a half just to make life interesting for you. But it's definitely worth doing. So.
How about flushing hashes? Is there a way to effectively flush hashes from a system?
So remove them from memory? Reboot. Yeah. Unfortunately, I mean, they'll eventually leave themselves. You know, memory cleanup eventually happens, but not fast enough. So, what else? Everybody wants to go to lunch.
What about hashes stored for offline login? Those are in the registry.
Yes, so those will always be a problem, and I didn't show that. But if I go back to protected users, I know I keep going back to it because I honestly love the protected users group. Yeah, you'll see cache credentials are blocked. It won't put them, it won't store them there. That does mean, right, that if you're not on the domain, you're not going to log in, but it's an admin account. You shouldn't need it, right? And there are all sorts of other wonderful things. And it's not in here, but if you haven't looked at their admin credential solution, LAPS, that's a good one to look at too, please. Yes?
The blocking cache credentials, that's the domain controller's group policy that targets the admin OU? Or is that the policy pushed to the...
No, so this is if you're using a Windows 10 host, or actually Windows 8.1 or newer, it doesn't cache your credentials. It won't keep.
Doesn't cache them.
They are only kept in memory when you're using it. Yep.
What about when you're using Windows 7 clients?
Then you don't get all the protections. It still tries to do stuff, but it once again, depending on your functional level, it's not as useful. So. Yep. What else? Come on. Give me a tough one. No? All right, well, thank you for your time. I appreciate it. Hopefully you learned something kind of interesting. And like I said, that first one, check that. Authenticated users. I keep harping on that because I couldn't believe how often I can do this. And it's great because they say their workstations are protected, but then I have my own Windows host that I can do whatever I want with. Thank you.